Monica's idea to host a Halloween party took on a life of its own. The more she planned, the more elaborate her ideas became. We were both excited, but I could tell she had a special energy about this. We spent hours getting the house ready, meticulously placing eerie decorations inside and out. The yard transformed into a haunted scene, with hanging skeletons, cobwebs stretching from the trees, and pumpkins carved into sinister faces lighting up the walkway. Inside, we draped dark fabric over the furniture, set up dim lights, and scattered artificial spiders and bones on the tables. With the lights low and a few hidden speakers playing ghostly whispers, the house took on an unsettling life of its own. Choosing our costumes was the next step. Monica suggested that everyone wear masks so no one's face would be visible, adding to the night's mystery. I picked a simple but creepy plague doctor costume, complete with the beaked mask and long black coat. Monica, however, went for something more enchanting and dark. She wore a black gown with a flowing hooded cape and a mask decorated with lace and small feathers that concealed her entire face, except for her piercing eyes. Her mask made her look like a haunting spirit from another era, elegant but somehow unnerving. As for the guest list, we each invited people from our respective circles. I invited my brother, Ben, who was as much of a Halloween fanatic as Monica was, along with a few friends from work. Monica invited her close friends and her sister, Mia. She seemed especially enthusiastic about Ben joining, mentioning several times how fun it would be to see him again. I noticed the gleam in her eyes whenever she talked about him coming, and for a moment, I wondered if there was something more behind that excitement. But I brushed it off, thinking she was just eager to have a party that included everyone close to us. Finally, the night of the party arrived. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a mix of anticipation and a touch of unease from the eerie setup we had created. One by one, the guests began to arrive, each dressed in dark, elaborate costumes with faces obscured by masks. The mystery and anonymity brought a strange thrill to the room. No one could tell who was who at first glance. People drifted through the house, barely recognizable in their haunting attire, casting long shadows across the walls. I spotted Monica early on, effortlessly gliding from group to group, her laughter echoing softly through the rooms. I felt proud seeing how much she'd put into this night, though I noticed she was somewhat elusive, disappearing here and there only to reappear in another part of the house. It was difficult to tell exactly where she was at any given moment, and in the dim lighting, even I found it challenging to recognize her. It was then that I caught sight of my brother, unmistakable despite his full costume. He wore a black suit, and his mask, a sleek, simple design that covered his entire face, somehow made him look taller and more imposing. I felt a strange sense of pride. He was in his element, mingling with the crowd. But then I noticed something. Monica was watching him, her masked face turned his way, lingering just a second too long before she vanished back into the crowd. As the night went on, the anonymity of the masks had everyone relaxed in a way that felt new, even liberating. People let loose, dancing and laughing louder than usual. My friends and brother blended with Monica's friends and her sister, everyone merging into one loud, shifting sea of costumes. Monica's sister, Mia, in particular, had embraced the theme, donning a long dress that made her look like a bride from beyond the grave. She seemed to be in on some secret, sharing knowing glances with Monica and flashing her a grin every time they crossed paths. I did my best to mingle with everyone, though I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I kept noticing Monica drifting toward Ben, and they seemed to be sharing private jokes or moments, little exchanges that felt unusually intimate. I tried to ignore it, rationalizing that it was just my imagination. The masks added an element of suspicion to everything. After all, maybe it was just the strange vibe of the night getting to me. As I stood by the drinks table, refilling my glass, I watched as Monica moved over to Ben again. They spoke in hushed tones, her fingers grazing his arm briefly before she leaned in to say something. Ben chuckled, his laughter muffled by his mask, and for a split second, I felt like an outsider in my own house. The sight of them standing so close stirred something uncomfortable in me, but I shook it off, unwilling to jump to conclusions on a night meant for fun. Then, just as quickly as she'd appeared by Ben's side, Monica vanished into the crowd again, her dark dress blending perfectly with the shadows in the room. I looked around, searching for her familiar figure, but with everyone masked, it felt like searching for a ghost. After a while, I decided to step outside for a breath of fresh air. The night was cool, and the breeze felt refreshing against my face. I leaned against the porch railing, listening to the muffled sounds of music and laughter from inside, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had been creeping over me since I'd seen Monica with Ben. I took a deep breath, watching my breath fog up in the chilly night air. When I went back inside, the party was in full swing. I scanned the room, spotting Monica's friends in their costumes, laughing together in a corner, and then I saw Monica near the staircase, speaking with Mia. I felt a sense of relief seeing her there, as if the familiar sight grounded me. But the relief was short-lived, as I noticed Ben leaning against the wall a few feet away, watching her. She seemed to sense his gaze because she looked up and met his eyes through her mask. The two of them exchanged glances, subtle but unmistakable. It was like watching a silent conversation, one that spoke volumes more than any words could. The thrill of the masks and mystery suddenly felt unsettling. I wanted to approach, to join the conversation, but something held me back. Instead, I watched as Monica walked over to Ben, her movements smooth and deliberate, and she whispered something in his ear before disappearing again into the crowd. I took a deep breath, feeling my pulse quicken. I wasn't entirely sure what I was witnessing, but my mind was already racing. The night stretched on, a blur of music, laughter, and masked faces, each interaction fueling my suspicions. The unease gnawed at me, growing with every stolen glance I saw exchanged between Monica and Ben. It was supposed to be a night of fun, a carefree evening where we could all hide behind masks, escaping the everyday and embracing a bit of mystery. But the longer I watched, the more I felt the tension creeping up my spine, like I was missing some unspoken part of their conversation. I decided I'd had enough of just standing by. I wasn't one to let my mind run wild with suspicions, but tonight felt different. Watching them, seeing her drift back toward him in the middle of a crowded room, cloaked by anonymity but unmistakable in her movements, stirred something in me that I couldn't ignore any longer. Taking a steadying breath, I wove through the crowd toward them, my heart pounding slightly faster with each step. I reached Monica just as she finished saying something to Ben. They both turned when I arrived, and though the mask hid most of her face, I sensed a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Monica," I said, forcing a lightness into my voice, "how about a dance?" There was a pause, an almost imperceptible hesitation that left me hanging, but she nodded. "Of course," she said, her voice smooth but lacking its usual warmth. She slipped her hand into mine, and we moved toward the makeshift dance floor in the center of the room. As the soft glow of the candlelight cast flickering shadows around us, I led her into a slow dance. Her hand felt strangely cool in mine, her touch lighter than usual, almost as if she was distracted. I searched her eyes, but her gaze drifted over my shoulder, flickering to the crowd behind me before returning to my face, her expression unreadable beneath her mask. "You've really outdone yourself tonight," I said, trying to break the silence. "Everyone seems to be having a great time." She nodded, her lips forming a brief smile. "Yes, it's turned out just as I hoped," she replied, but her enthusiasm felt forced. Her eyes shifted subtly over my shoulder again, almost as if she were checking to see if Ben was watching. My grip on her waist tightened slightly as I tried to bring her attention back to me, hoping the moment would feel normal again. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice softening. She looked up at me, and for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes, but she masked it quickly, giving me another one of her brief smiles. "I'm fine, Jack," she said, her voice calm, just excited to see everyone enjoying the party. "It was a lot of work." I nodded, but something in her tone felt off. The music swirled around us, the rhythm of the song slow and haunting, and I realized that we were barely moving. She seemed to sway with me only out of obligation, her gaze distant, slipping over my shoulder more times than I could ignore. My jaw tightened, and I had to resist the urge to look behind me, to see if Ben was watching, to confirm if she was really searching for him in the crowd. But I couldn't stand the feeling of her detachment, the way she seemed like she'd rather be anywhere else. I leaned in a little closer, enough that my voice wouldn't carry beyond the two of us. "Are you sure there's nothing on your mind tonight?" Her gaze snapped back to mine, something guarded flickering in her eyes. "Why would there be?" she asked, her tone defensive. It felt like a wall had gone up between us, an invisible barrier that hadn't been there before. "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "You seem preoccupied." She pulled back just a bit, the space between us widening, though we still swayed to the music. Her hand felt cold in mine, almost as if the warmth of the night couldn't reach her. "Jack, I'm fine," she said, her voice clipped. "It's a party. Let's just enjoy it." I bit back a sigh, nodding, though something about her response felt hollow. I released her from the dance, a polite distance between us as the song ended, and she gave me a slight smile before slipping away, disappearing into the crowd without a word. She moved like a shadow, her figure vanishing into the sea of costumes, leaving me standing alone on the dance floor. I stood there for a moment, watching the other couples around me sway to the music, and a feeling of loneliness settled over me. It was strange, standing in a room full of friends and family but feeling like I was on the outside looking in. The anonymity of the masks suddenly felt less thrilling and more unsettling, as though everyone around me was hiding something behind their disguises. A quiet laugh drifted to my ears, drawing my attention. I turned and saw Monica near the corner of the room, her figure unmistakable, standing close to Ben once again. I clenched my jaw, feeling the tension simmering beneath my calm exterior. Their heads were close together, and though I couldn't hear what they were saying, the intimacy of their body language was clear. She seemed more animated, more engaged with him than she'd been during our dance, her gestures lively and her laughter soft, the kind that used to be reserved just for us. I could no longer ignore the unease churning in my gut. I took a step toward them, the impulse to interrupt flaring up again. I wanted to pull her aside, to ask her what was going on, to tell her that this wasn't the way things should be. But I hesitated, a voice in my head warning me to tread carefully, that perhaps I was misinterpreting things. Instead, I turned away, making my way over to the drink table. I poured myself a glass of punch, needing something to steady my nerves, but my gaze drifted back to them like a magnet, unable to look away for long. She was leaning in closer now, her hand resting lightly on Ben's arm, and I felt a pang of frustration twist through me. They moved through the crowd, slipping away together toward the back of the house, out of sight and away from the main room. A wave of heat rose in my chest as I watched them disappear. Every instinct in me told me to follow them, to see where they were going, to find out what was really happening between them. But I stayed rooted in place, my mind spinning with doubts and unanswered questions. Was I overthinking things? Was I letting the mystery and the masks get to my head? As I stood there, lost in thought, Mia appeared by my side, breaking through my concentration. "Hey, Jack," she said, her voice cheerful. She had a mischievous glint in her eyes, and she leaned in close, her voice lowering as she glanced around the room. "Enjoying the night?" I forced a smile, not wanting to reveal the turmoil churning inside me. "Yeah, it's a great party. Monica really put her heart into it." Mia nodded, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "She sure did," she said, her gaze drifting toward the direction where Monica and Ben had gone. There was something in her tone that made my stomach drop, an unspoken suggestion that lingered between us. Unable to hold back any longer, I turned to her, my voice tense. Do you know what's going on with her tonight? She seems different." Mia raised an eyebrow, her smile fading slightly as she studied my face. After a brief pause, she placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, though her expression remained unreadable. "Jack," she said softly, "sometimes people just need a little bit of excitement, something out of the ordinary. Don't take everything too seriously, okay?" Her words lingered in the air, vague yet pointed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a hidden message beneath them. The jealousy was building in me, thick and suffocating, each glance between Monica and Ben fueling the simmering anger in my chest. Mia's cryptic words only deepened the feeling, and the thought of Monica's laughter, her light touch on Ben's arm, kept replaying in my mind, gnawing at my composure. Deciding that I needed a distraction, I headed to the backyard, where we'd set up a small grill for the party. Cooking was usually therapeutic for me, a way to clear my mind, and tonight, I needed it more than ever. As I opened the grill and placed a few burgers over the heat, the flames crackling and sizzling under the cool night air, I felt the first hint of calm settle over me. I focused on the simple task of flipping the patties, trying to let the steady rhythm ease my mind and quiet the swirl of doubts and jealousy. The coolness of the night air mixed with the warmth of the grill, creating a momentary comfort. Yet, even as I concentrated on the task at hand, I couldn't stop my thoughts from drifting back to Monica. Each time I imagined her with Ben, lingering close, whispering, I felt a pang of anger that burned as hot as the grill in front of me. But I forced myself to stay put, telling myself I was overreacting, that the night and the masks had just given everything a different, mysterious vibe. This was Monica, my wife. Surely, there was nothing more to it. As I finally stacked the freshly cooked burgers onto a tray, I felt ready to face the party again, hoping that a quick bite would keep me grounded. But when I returned to the main room, scanning the crowd of masked faces, Monica was nowhere to be found. I moved through the clusters of guests, the masked figures nodding at me as they chatted, danced, and laughed. But no Monica. I craned my neck, searching every corner, my eyes darting from one figure to the next, hoping to catch a glimpse of her elegant, dark costume or that distinctive feathered mask she wore. But there was no sign of her. A knot formed in my stomach as I continued to search, the familiar trickle of dread seeping into my thoughts. I looked over by the staircase where I'd seen her and Ben last, but the spot was empty now, just a shadowy corner blending into the dark decor. An uneasy feeling began to settle over me as I scanned the room again, more urgently this time. I checked near the dining room, then the kitchen, wondering if she had slipped off for a quiet drink. But again, nothing. Then it hit me, I hadn't seen Ben either since I'd stepped out to grill. He wasn't by the drinks table where he'd been lingering earlier, nor was he talking to any of the guests from my work who he usually got along with. It was as if both of them had vanished into thin air. My pulse quickened, and I could feel my hands tighten around the tray of burgers as I fought to keep my expression neutral. I didn't want to look like some paranoid husband scouring the party for his wife, but with each passing second, the worry grew, rooted in my gut, impossible to shake. I set the tray down, abandoning the burgers, and decided to check the more secluded parts of the house. I told myself it was nothing, that they'd both just wandered off somewhere, separately, I hoped. But the feeling that had been gnawing at me all night turned darker, heavier, twisting inside me with each step as I moved from one room to the next. First, I checked the den, a small room at the back of the house where we'd set up a quieter space for people who wanted to sit and chat away from the noise. It was empty, just the faint hum of the speakers and the flicker of candlelight casting eerie shadows on the walls. I made my way through the halls, past the bathroom door, half expecting to see Monica's dark silhouette reappear in front of me at any moment, her mask giving way to that familiar face, maybe even laughing at how serious I'd gotten. But as I moved through the house, each room dark and quiet, I found nothing. The back hallway led to the door to our basement, where we stored most of our decorations and party supplies, and the faint sound of footsteps drifting up from below caught my attention. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob, before finally pushing the door open and stepping down the narrow staircase. The basement was dimly lit, filled with leftover decorations from previous Halloweens, stacks of old boxes, and shelves packed with tools and supplies. I scanned the room quickly, and it was only then that I noticed two figures standing off to the side, half hidden by the shadows. My heart leapt into my throat as I realized who they were, Monica and Ben, standing too close, their heads bent toward each other as if caught in an intimate, whispered conversation. They froze as I stepped into view, and I saw Monica's hand drop from where it had rested on Ben's arm, the movement quick, almost guilty. Ben's masked face turned toward me, and though his expression was hidden, I could feel the tension in the air, thick and undeniable. "Jack," Monica's voice came out soft, the hint of surprise unmistakable. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the words came out sharper than I intended. "What are you two doing down here?" I asked, forcing myself to sound casual, though I could hear the edge in my tone. Ben cleared his throat, glancing at Monica before replying. Just catching up. It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk. Monica nodded, her face obscured by the mask, but I could see the slight flush on her neck, a small detail that didn't escape my notice. Yes, we just needed some air from the crowd, she added, her words almost hurried. My gaze shifted between them, noting the tension in their posture, the way they seemed caught off guard, as though they hadn't expected anyone to find them. I felt the familiar pang of jealousy spike, sharper than ever, mingling with the suspicion that had been lurking in the back of my mind all night. I see, I replied, keeping my voice low. But the party's upstairs, isn't it? They both looked away, and an awkward silence settled between us. Finally, Ben shifted, clearing his throat. We should probably head back, he said, his tone uncharacteristically awkward. Without another word, they moved past me, back up the stairs, leaving me standing alone in the dim light of the basement. The uneasy feeling lingered, pressing heavily on me. Something was wrong, whatever they'd been doing or saying down here, it wasn't just a simple catch-up between old friends. The moment had felt too private, too charged, and it left a sour taste in my mouth. I followed them upstairs, feeling a hollowness settle in my chest, an ache that refused to go away. By the time I reached the main floor again, they had already rejoined the crowd, slipping seamlessly back into the party as if nothing had happened. I stood by the doorway, watching Monica as she laughed with her friends, the same vibrant smile on her face, as though nothing were amiss. But to me, everything felt off. Each laugh, each glance she threw toward Ben felt loaded, like there was something unspoken between them, something I couldn't quite touch but could feel creeping through the cracks in our evening. The party continued around us, guests moving in a lively, oblivious rhythm, but for me, the night had taken a dark turn. I tried to shake it off, tried to blend back into the party, to ignore the nagging voice in my mind that kept replaying the look they'd shared in the basement. But no matter how hard I tried, the unease stayed with me, casting a shadow over the night that refused to lift. As I moved through the crowd, plastering a polite smile on my face, I couldn't help but feel like I just glimpsed something I wasn't supposed to see, something that had slipped through the cracks in our carefully built lives. And now, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't unsee it. As I moved back into the party, the realization hit me like a cold slap to the face: Monica liked my brother. There was no other way to explain it. The way she looked at him, laughed at his jokes, the subtle touches, and the fact that they'd slipped away to the basement together, it was all so painfully obvious now. The thought made me feel sick, my stomach twisting with a mix of anger and betrayal. The one person who should have been above any flirtation was the very person she was paying the most attention to tonight. I felt a sharp, bitter anger swell up inside me, and with it, the urge to make her feel what I was feeling. I didn't deserve this, didn't deserve to feel like the odd one out in my own marriage, especially at a party we'd spent so much time planning together. If she wanted to play games, then maybe it was time for me to give her a taste of her own medicine. I scanned the room, my gaze landing on Mia, Monica's sister. She was laughing with a few of Monica's friends, her mask perched slightly askew, revealing her familiar, mischievous smile. She had a light, carefree energy about her, her laughter ringing out easily as she tossed her hair back and leaned in close to listen to one of her friends. I hadn't ever really thought about Mia this way before, but tonight, I figured she could be the perfect distraction. If Monica was so keen on paying attention to someone else, maybe I could shift my focus too. With a newfound determination, I made my way over to Mia, past the clusters of masked figures, ignoring the glances and polite greetings as I pushed forward. She noticed me approaching, her smile widening as she recognized me. "Well, Jack," she greeted, her tone playful, "you look like you've been keeping an eye on everyone tonight. Finally come to join the fun?" I gave her a smile that I hoped looked natural, though my emotions were still swirling. "I thought I'd take a break from hosting duties," I replied, forcing a lightness into my voice. "And maybe spend some time with the best-looking lady at the party." Mia raised an eyebrow, her grin widening. "Is that so?" she teased, clearly amused. "Careful, Jack, that kind of talk could get you in trouble. Maybe a little trouble's what I'm looking for tonight, I replied, leaning in slightly, lowering my voice just enough to make it sound like I was confiding something. Her laughter bubbled up again, bright and infectious, and she reached out, placing a hand on my arm. Well, I wouldn't want to disappoint you, then, she said, her voice carrying a flirtatious edge. I could see her intrigue spark, her gaze sharpening as she assessed me, her expression laced with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. I caught a glimpse of Monica across the room, standing next to Ben, her gaze flickering our way. She noticed us, and I could sense her discomfort even from a distance. Her mask couldn't hide the small shift in her posture, the way her smile faltered just a bit as she took in the sight of me standing close to her sister. A strange satisfaction filled me, a sense of revenge that felt petty but oddly satisfying. If she was going to play games, then I could play them too. I turned back to Mia, letting my smile grow a little wider, making sure Monica could see how focused I was on her sister. It's funny, Mia, I said, letting my voice carry just a bit louder, I don't think we've really talked like this before. I guess we've both been a little too wrapped up in our own worlds. She tilted her head, her eyes sparkling with interest. Well, maybe it's time we change that, she replied, giving me a playful nudge. You know, I've always thought you were one of the more interesting people in the room, but you keep to yourself so much. I chuckled, feeling the tension within me ease as I leaned into the conversation. Maybe I just needed the right company, I said, casting her a wink. We continued to chat, our conversation light and flirty, with her laughing at my jokes and leaning in closer as if we shared a secret. Every now and then, I glanced over Mia's shoulder, catching sight of Monica and Ben. She was watching us now, her posture a little stiff, her gaze narrowed slightly as she tracked our interaction. I could feel her jealousy simmering from across the room, and I savored it, hoping she was feeling the same knot of irritation and possessiveness that had plagued me all night. Mia seemed to be enjoying the attention, clearly surprised by the shift in dynamic. I didn't know you had such a fun side, Jack, she teased, her voice warm. Maybe we need to have these parties more often if this is what it brings out in you. I laughed, keeping my expression playful. Only if I get to spend them with someone as fun as you, I replied, letting the words hang just enough to keep the flirtation going. I didn't have to fake the smile that spread across my face when I saw Monica whisper something to Ben before stepping away from him, her gaze sharp as she moved through the crowd in our direction. I'd gotten her attention, just as I'd wanted. A few moments later, Monica reached us, her expression neutral but her eyes betraying a flicker of annoyance as she addressed Mia. Hey, mind if I borrow Jack for a second? She asked, her tone casual, though I could sense the tension beneath it. Mia's grin widened, and she gave me a playful nudge. Looks like you're in demand tonight, she said, laughing as she released my arm. Go on, Jack, duty calls. I met Monica's gaze, allowing myself a small, satisfied smile as I stepped closer to her. Everything okay? I asked, feigning innocence, though I knew perfectly well why she'd come over. Her jaw tightened slightly, her lips pressing together before she forced a small smile. Just wanted to check in, make sure you were enjoying yourself, she replied, her voice even, though there was an edge to it. Oh, I am, I said, letting my gaze linger on Mia for a split second before returning to Monica. It's been a great night. Everyone seems to be having a good time. Her eyes narrowed just a bit, and she gave a small nod. Yes, I've noticed, she said, her voice cool. She seemed to hesitate, her expression unreadable beneath the mask, and for a moment, we just stood there in silence, the tension between us palpable. Finally, she took a breath, her shoulders relaxing a fraction as she looked away. Well, I just thought I'd check on you, she said, her voice softer now. It's been a busy night. I nodded, letting the silence stretch for a moment before speaking. Yeah, it has. But it's nice to spend time with everyone, I said, my tone pointed. It's not every day I get to see my brother and your sister. Kind of nice to reconnect. She gave a stiff smile, her gaze not quite meeting mine. Yes, family is important, she murmured, her voice almost distant. There was something in her expression, a flicker of vulnerability that I hadn't expected. For a moment, the anger I'd been holding onto softened, replaced by a strange sadness. I wasn't sure if she realized the impact of her actions, if she understood just how much her behavior with Ben had hurt me. Maybe this was her way of seeking something she felt was missing between us. But even if it was, the sting of her closeness with my brother was a wound that would take time to heal. The crowd swayed around us, a blur of laughter and shadows, yet we stood there in a strange standoff, both aware that something had shifted between us tonight. I wasn't sure what would come of it, but as I met her gaze, I saw something that hinted at a realization dawning in her eyes, a hint of regret, a glimmer of understanding. "Jack," she began, her voice barely a whisper, but before she could continue, someone bumped into us, breaking the moment and pulling us both back to the present. She looked away, and just like that, the connection was lost, replaced by the hum of the party around us. I nodded, stepping back, feeling the weight of unspoken words linger between us. "Maybe we should get back to our guests," I said, keeping my tone light, though my heart felt heavy. Monica gave a small nod, her expression unreadable, and together, we drifted back into the crowd, each of us carrying the silence of the unresolved tension between us. It was a night neither of us would forget, though I wasn't sure if we'd ever fully address what had just happened, or if things would ever be the same.